Sarah Everard, she was a white woman, of middle class girl. She was working. I think she worked for a fairly established company. She was doing well for herself. She was walking across Clapham Common. Last time she was seen going into a supermarket by CCTV, and then she disappears. And Sarah Everard, her body was found in Kent, in the woods, dismembered, and it came out that a police officer had, kidnapped her, abducted her off the street, and he actually was he was part of a unit of the police that protected embassies. So he was one of those police officers that you would see, standing outside like a very important political figure's house, machine gun, so on. Yeah, she disappeared. Her disappearance caused, complete outcry when it happened, but then it came out that it was a police officer. And it's this whole notion of women being unsafe on the streets, and the fact that it was a police officer made it even worse. Then we see at the protests at Clapham Common, we see the protests, there's a bit of havoc between the police and the people. And that made it worse, considering it was a police officer that abducted her. Obviously, they're still going through that case. There's still a verdict to be made. The charges are still being set up, but it's pretty clear that it was him. I think it's important to think about women and their general safety on the streets. We get onto this notion of the sexualization of women and how women are often, catcalled, wolf whistled, beeped at by random men, stared down, XYZ. You're not ever going to meet a woman that hasn't had her own experience. There was that survey, 97% of women have experienced some sort of sexual offence or sexual encounter or sexual harassment. That wasn't government statistics, but it was a survey. And I think that survey should be given some recognition. And as it was, obviously, by the papers, it was published by The Guardian. I myself, led some of the speeches about sexual violence in schools. And I just think it's very important to recognise that women do feel unsafe. Text me when you get home is not an uncommon message for a girl to send to her friend when they leave each other at night, because it is a genuine threat. Women's safety is a genuine threat, and you would have thought that Clapham Common is quite a safe place to walk around at night. I guess I know that she was in the middle of the common and it could have been dark, whatever, but it bewilders me that still even though we're in such a developed Western culture, that she could have just been taken off the streets like that, abducted, killed. With me, Sarah Everard was devastating because I've had my own experiences of that nature, and although it was not in the UK where I had my own run-in, it did resonate with me because she was murdered. She was brutally murdered and she was left, just her body was left. And I think that, a lot of women who are so fierce in advocating for women's rights are often casted as, quote, feminazis, or, it's this whole notion of hating men. But there is like a genuine point to be made that women are vulnerable. They are at risk.
100.
But also, for me personally, I think I have a very different viewpoint to a lot of women, in which you have to be practical in some situations. And I think we have to educate as opposed to expel. So you have to educate men on what is right and wrong, but you can't completely cut them off. Because what is cutting them off going to do? You're just going to isolate them, but that's not going to teach them anything. I think what you need to do is you need to correct people. You need to, make them aware that, even if a sexual advance is too forward, then, you need to just correct them on it, but you can't isolate them, because isolating people only makes them angry and isn't going to change behavior. I think that's my viewpoint. So the sexualization of women in music and culture, I could list like 1,000 rappers off the top of my head, like just yeah, literally, literally, like it's. But that is just the way that I mean, I'm passionate about music myself, but a lot of the lyrics are to do with sexualizing women in a certain way, and that to the listeners, that's going to mean that they're also going to, the male listeners, that means that they're also going to look at women in that same way. And I think that women in today's society, there's a very big difference between a black woman and a white woman. A black woman is much more disadvantaged than a white woman is in today's society. But then if you look at the case like Sarah Everard, you see this common ground of women are still unsafe regardless of race, right? There's still this view that you can take advantage of a woman regardless of what they look like.